This is Wei Li with patch 5.2. I'm here with Fusion again, episode 2. We're with Trance, Zach, the dude, and Josh. And you know, we're missing Jay because we deported his ass. First, we have the DFG changes.
Yes, we
Anyone
do.
want to talk about the DFG changes?
Chunky.
My God.
What the fuck is wrong
Okay,
with
so
you?
basically, DFG was removed. Does anyone want to add anything about that?
Do I need to cover it? Alright.
Zach, take over.
I think it's a really nice thing that Riot did to remove DFG because I think it was a pretty stupid item as a core because it made it so you would just insta-die without really having any counterplay to the majority of mages if they're somewhat fed. Whereas normally if you just dodge one of their abilities or whatever, you'll be fine, but if they DFG you, it like replaces a different ability that it's like a targeted ability, so you can't really go around it in any way. So it's just a free kill on like a squishy carry, like an 80 carry generally. And it's changing up a lot of the mid lane mages because it was such a core item on so many of them, such as like Katarina, Ahri, Veigar. There's a ton of champions that DFG could work well on, so it's going to be interesting to see how the mid lane meta fluctuates because by far the mid lane is going to change the most from this change. So it'll be interesting to see what mid laners become more popular because of this change and what mid laners stop being played as often.
Okay, well, next is the Triss changes.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, Trist. I really like the Trist changes because they're nerfing his late game and buffing his early mid game, which is really, really nice, I think. They're nerfing his late game for a few reasons because his 8 attack speed level, or growth per level, is nerfed by like 1. It was like 2.5, and now it's like 1.5. So that doesn't really seem like too much, but after 18 levels, that's like 18% attack speed or something like that. It's like a lot of attack speed that you're just missing. It's like 500-ish gold worth. That's pretty big nerf, just having 500 combat stats less than before. And also his attack range is nerfed by, I think it's like 36 at max rank. So instead of having like 709 attack, he'll have like 673 or something along those lines. So he's gonna be, I think this change buffs Kog'Maw, Jinx, and Caitlyn in a sense because Triss was so strong late game because his range was unmatched by anyone except for Kog'Maw with his W active, but that's really unreliable and stuff. So it's gonna be bringing up the levels of other AD carries late game where Triss was just the god before, and early game it's really nice because his E is a lot more cool, whereas before it was just you would attack them and put E on them and then walk away and not really have to worry about it. But now you actually have to attack them and follow up with the E. And then you can choose when you want it to explode, so you can go for like 6 explode combos on like multiple people. And then also now his E scales off AD, where before it didn't at all. Now it has a 1.1 attack damage ratio at the max rank. So that's going to be really, really big for his mid game or her mid game power, whereas before she didn't have any AD ratios. Now she actually has 1. So that's really helpful for mid game battles. So I really like the changes overall. It changes her from just this god where if you lost lane to her she would just completely demolish everything. Well, she still is kind of like that. It's a lot more fair where Triss can do well in lane, I think, a lot better than before, and then still look to carry late game, but not as much as before.
Yeah, I like it. It's kind of bringing an old champion into 2015. I mean, she hasn't been changed at all since, I've been playing this game since beta. She's been around since beta. She hasn't been changed. And to me, it's a welcome change. It's kind of gives her a new spin with that E, but still kind of retains all the same core stuff. So It's cool.
Yep.
Alright, that's cool. So Ahri changes.
I think these Ahri changes are pretty interesting. She gains movement speed when she Qs now over time. That decays rapidly. It's going to be really interesting because she's going to be able to have a lot more mobility and chase potential and even like disengage potential to run away. So, and then the other change is her Foxfire prioritizing better now, and it deals more damage. So that's going to be a really good change because it used to be where like if the target died, it would still target that died. So it's just going to be overall way better.
Yeah, it's really cool changes, I think, for Ahri, because before she was so ultimate dependent, and she was pretty dependent on landing her E because of the pretty much DFG type effects where it'd give her 20% extra magic damage. So I think it's pretty cool that they're making it so she's not as ult reliant, because having the movement speed from her Q really helps her out a lot, because without her ult, she's just like super slow, really easy to catch, so it gives her like an extra boost without the ulti, and it also helps to counteract the loss of the 20% magic damage from her E. And the W change is also really nice because it sucks when like something died and all your W charges hit the same person.
Yeah.
And then it also, the damage buff helps a lot. Because before, as Ahri, you could just like ulti on someone, DFG W, and then they would pretty much die. So having extra damage on your W will help out, but it won't be nearly as strong as the DFG Ahri. So that's really nice too, because I felt like Ahri with DFG was really annoying, because if she just ults at you, presses W before she even ults, and then just clicks on you and targets you with DFG, you're pretty much going to die as a squishy character. So I think it's a lot more fluid of a champion now.
Okay. What about the Akali nerfs?
I mean, I kind of like the nerf because fuck Akali.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
okay.
And she won't be seen as much anymore. Maybe she'll die.
Maybe a rework or something.
Yeah, maybe a rework or something.
Or delete her.
Yeah, they should start with Teemo first. Okay, so since you said something, Trance, what about the Annie changes?
Annie changes. I don't think they needed to buff Annie because she's like a ridiculous champion. But it's a slight buff to her Tibbers. They reduced the armor and MR of her Molten Shield, and now you can activate it and buff your Tibbers. So it has movement speed and gets the buffs of Molten Shield. It's not that big, but at the same time, they really don't need to like do it at all, because Annie doesn't need a buff. If anything, she needs to be nerfed in her damage, but that's just me, personally.
Oh god, I'm like totally confused by the buffs. I'm just the same as Trance. I don't understand why Annie needs a buff. She's peeking back in competitive play again as a support, and I don't even think she's that bad of a mid laner right now, personally. So, even in solo queue, she's pretty terror, so I don't understand why she's receiving a buff, but that's just me.
Do you think maybe top Annie will be more viable with these changes, where it's more of an emphasis on the Tibbers? Chunky?
I'll just go for Chunky.
Jesus, what is he?
What's wrong with you?
Because I think top lane Tibbers will be much more of a threat, because Annie's always been super lane dominant with her range and constant stuns and just high base damage. So being able to Molten Shield your Tibbers is actually really cool, because you can like use your Tibbers as a zoning tool, where they walk up and either they have to choose to hit the Tibbers to take the Molten Shield damage and the area of effect damage from Tibbers, or they can just like run away from Tibbers during the duration. So it'll make Tibbers a lot more scary. But like Trance and Josh were saying, I don't really think it's necessary to buff Annie. And it seems especially weird how they're buffing Annie, but they just nerf Sona, because they like kind of fill kind of similar roles where they're both super lane dominant and they have the really strong ultimate for group fights. And it's really weird to me where Annie is already stronger than Sona, in my opinion, a little bit, where they're buffing Annie and nerfing Sona. So I think it's a weird change.
Yeah, I think with the Sona is because of the two-way. You know, Sona does damage and heals. So maybe that's why.
That's true.
That's a good example you brought up with Sona. In my opinion, a good example of like a healthy AoE ultimate is like a crescendo. You know, you have enough reaction time to flash it, but can you flash a flash Tibbers? Yeah. Maybe if you're lucky. I mean, does anybody honestly have the reaction time to flash that if they come out of the fog of war? Probably not. That spell is so strong. Like, I can't stand playing against Annie's personally, but.
Yeah, and a good example of this was over the weekend when X-Special flashed the engage and just Tibbers onto them. Like, there's no way you could react.
Yeah, I think Annie, her ultimate might need like, her ultimate and maybe even her W would need like a very short cast time, like maybe even like 0.1 of a second for both, to make it a lot more counterplay-esque, because like Josh said, you seriously have to just anticipate her flash ulting, because it's too hard to react to her unless if she misplays, because It's just literally like instant.
Yeah.
So you just have to anticipate it.
I
It's
feel
really
like
hard.
that's the same issue with Gnar, kind of, with his ultimate. Like, you can't, it just happens, sort of.
It's to a lesser degree. I think Gnar has a cast time, so you have like more time
really?
to react. Yeah,
Gnar has
it's
a
like
cast
similar
time?
to Sona's cast time, but
Okay.
it's just Sona's different because like her cast time finishes and then it starts, so like it doesn't even finish until after all of it is done. So like if they're at the very end of the spell, like they won't get hit until they actually get hit by the spell, and like Gnar and Annie both just happen instantly, completely, in terms of the actual spell being finished. So, like Gnar is in the middle, but like Annie is just really stupid.
Okay.
It's just way too fast.
I feel like we might see more Annie top than Cassiopeia top now that they're nerfing Cassiopeia.
Well, I mean, you could jump right in to cast, because that's the next thing.
Oh, well, Cassiopeia, they're nerfing her.
Mana cost on both her Q and E,
Yeah.
I think.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be pretty rough early on. When she builds tier, it's gonna be fine though. And
Yeah.
when
Yeah,
she
that's
last
the
hits,
point.
she gains the mana back, so it's not that big of a deal. But
Yeah, personally, I
it's
think
definitely
Cass will. Oh, sorry for cutting it. You can.
It's good.
Okay. I think Cass will still be really OP. It's just you're gonna have to go more tier-oriented builds or like Athene's because she costs way too much mana. Like you have to
Cass.
spam abilities on Cass, so you definitely need Athene's or like a tier. It's just way too good. But I think she'll still be really strong. But I think like top Annie and top Cass could both be pretty solid options.
Why do you think Cass wasn't seen as much, like, now, still?
She hasn't been seen as much because she got a rework relatively recently where she gets like stacks from her passive, and like it actually is insane how many stats she gets for free. Like at max rank of her passive, she gets like spellbam from her E. She gets like 30% AP, which is like a free death cap unique passive, which is absolutely huge, and then 25% CDR, which is also pretty freaking crazy. Where mid lane, you don't even need to build any CDR items, and with a blue buff, you're gonna basically have the cap. It's insane how much free stats she has for how spammable and how much damage she does.
So basically just like a high, level of difficulty, so people really have to pick
Oh
up
yeah.
on her.
To answer the original question, she's just like, I think she's a really, really high skill cap champion that people didn't really give a fair enough chance when they tried to re-pick her up after the change. They just thought she was kind of weak early, and then they like fed her something. So like, damn, this champion sucks.
Yeah.
Because that's pretty much what everyone does, pretty much every time champions changed. So I think it's just she has a high skill cap, and it'll take a while for people to finally realize that she's pretty OP.
Yeah, it's sad that Reginald is not in the scene anymore. He would definitely pull that out.
The innovator.
So now for the... Do you have something to add?
Yeah, no one has really put in the time for Cassiopeia. That's why we haven't seen her that often. But now that other people have played her, people are gonna start picking her up.
Yeah. Okay. So next up we have the Fizz changes. Last time we kind of talked briefly about the Fizz changes, especially the Q, how you could flash the Q damage. And now they actually put in the patch notes for this time, so we were right about that, it looks like. Does anyone want to elaborate on the additional Fizz changes?
It's
Did you want to talk about it?
pretty much a huge Q nerf, right? They
Yeah,
just kind
huge
of,
Q nerf, and the ultimate changed where you just do more damage to the target.
So the huge Q nerf is, I mean, one of the most annoying things about playing against Fizz is when they got a little too fed, when they would have Lichbane and have a lot of AP. Good Fizzes could just like flash on a squishy carry, literally just flash WQ auto, probably didn't even have to auto, and then just trickster away, and they'd either be dead from that, or they'd be so chunked that they'd be zoned out of the fight, or if they got hit by a Chum the Waters while he jumped in and queued, they'd probably be dead. So I think that's a good change, nerfing the AP ratio, nerfing the damage on it, because that just becomes too strong of a spell late game. They also did some changes to W, where I think they put more. They took the scaling, I think, off the passive. They took the AP off that.
Yeah, they took the AP
They
off of
put-
that, and they added missing health. Like rank 5, I think it's 8% missing
That already,
health.
that already
No,
had
they still
that.
had it. They still had
That
that.
already
Oh, they had that before?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
And then they put a little
So
bit
they
more
just
AP
nerfed it.
on the active damage, just to kind of compensate for the Q nerf. So I think that makes sense. And then the ult nerf, the ult buff, where it kind of has what Ahri used to have on her charm, where any target that got hit by Chum the Waters when it went off, they'd take more damage. Is it from everybody or just Fizz?
I think it's just Fizz.
Just Fizz
yeah.
would do 20% more damage to the target for 6 seconds. So, I mean, that kind of compensates for the Q nerf in terms of damage. It's not going to hit quite as hard. It's basically saying, like, in order to burst somebody, like, you got to land the ult.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it's saying.
Yeah. Personally, I'm not really a big fan of the Fizz changes because I can see the direction they want to take with Fizz, where they just want to make it so you have to land the ulti to get a kill, because they just nerfed everything else really hard. And it's like weird that they did this because they removed DFG, they removed the 20% damage from Ahri's E, but then they're adding it to Fizz instead.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's like really weird of a change to me. And then also, like, I don't really know if they're thinking about this, but their early game of Fizz is already pretty bad, and then they're like making it way worse because you can flash the Q, and the Q does already like it does half of the damage of or something like that from before, and also W's nerfed a lot, so it's like a really weird change. And I think instead of doing what they did to Fizz, they could have just made it so you could flash the Q or something, like avoid the Q damage, and maybe make it so Q doesn't proc Sheen, because I think the biggest thing about Fizz before was that late game, if you just W'd and then Q'd, you would pretty much die.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lot more... I think it would just been a better change if like it didn't proc the Lich Bane, and then you actually had to like attack again to proc the Lich Bane. Yeah, it's a lot more fluid, I think. Or less fluid for the Fizz players, but it would have been more fair for everyone else, I think. So it's just weird changes, I think, for Fizz.
Yeah. Alright, next we have the Nid changes. This is mostly in the jungle, so the dude take over.
Yes. So Nidalee, she's going to be able to proc her hunted passive on the big monsters. That's pretty huge for her clear time, which is already, in my opinion, pretty good. I've played quite a bit in mid jungle lately, and like she's got a massive, like, monstrous clear time. And now she's going to be able to have all these quality of life changes to where, you know, when you think of her hunted passive, you think, you know, being able to jump to the target, like, from massive range. So that's going to help her, like, escaping and outplays and whatnot. It's also going to help her clear time, moving through the jungle, you know, more damage to the hunted targets. It just, everything about it just buffs her clear time, and it kind of, like, piles onto what's already good about her. So I think it's a welcome change for me, because I like Nidalee jungle, but I think she might be, especially with all the changes they did to the jungle, we'll talk about later with the item nerfs. I think it's like kind of might make her one of the strongest junglers.
Actually, you can just talk about that now, because we just have to talk about Zed before the jungle, so just jump in that with...
Okay, so the jungle change they made was... What the hell?
This guy's chilling around us.
The jungle change they made was... Oh my god, this stupid fly. I'm gonna kill that thing.
You've been here the whole interview, man. Might as well put
It's
him
like
in the
that
title.
moth that always is in my room.
So they made it so the first jungle item, your Stalker's Blades, your Ranger's Trailblazers, that costs 450 gold instead of 350 now. What's that? It's my hair. So this kind of hurts a lot of junglers who would do what I call just doing 3 camps and recalling. And that's what a lot of people did on, like, Jarvan, Lee Sin, and whatnot. They'd do those 3 camps, they'd hit level 3, they'd recall, they'd buy that item, and then they'd be good for the next, you know, 2-3 minutes, whatever, however long they wanted to stay. Well, now it's a little bit different, because I don't think that those 3 camps quite gets you to 450 gold, and you will have to do probably 1 more camp or go kill the Scuttle Crab, which is, I think, what a lot of junglers will end up doing. They'll do the 3 camps, and then they'll just go for the closest Scuttle. But I think that makes things kind of interesting, because it'll just kind of make mind games. Like, what if you have 2 junglers that start on the same side? That might be like, okay, I'm Lee Sin against Elise. Like, who's stronger at level 3? Who's going to be higher? Like, who's going to... It might make, like, early Scuttle contests, which I think people are overlooking. I think that'll be a big deal from this change that people, you know, might not think of. But, yeah, the 450 gold change is going to be interesting, because it's going to buff junglers who don't get chunked as hard through the early clear. And I think Nidalee's can be one of those junglers now.
Yeah.
And that definitely hurts, like, Lee Sin and Jarvan, in my opinion, who are very strong right now. But another weird thing is it doesn't really hurt Rek'Sai much, because Rek'Sai's fine after 3 camps too. I don't know. It's kind of a weird change, but I like it. It just, you know, it's kind of a hit to Lee Sin and Jarvan, which I think are being completely overplayed right now. They're too strong.
Yeah. Personally, I think that Nidalee will be the queen of the jungle in the new patch.
The queen?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Because, like, her clear is really good. She doesn't take that much damage from camps. She has sustain, and, like, now with the hunted thing, it's, like, really, really good for her clear speed. And, like, she's really good at skirmishing. She's really high mobility. She can escape through the jungle really easy if something goes wrong. And it's just, like, her early game is super, super strong. Her mid game is really strong. She's a really, really strong champion. And with the Rek'Sai nerfs, again, like, they nerfed him by 20 before. They're nerfing by 20 again. Like 40 damage at max strength for Q is like really big over the course of 2 nerfs. So I think that Rek'Sai, he'll still be strong, but we'll be seeing a little bit less play. I think we'll be seeing a lot more Nidalee.
Okay.
Especially like Josh was saying with the extra 100 gold, that's like really big for champions like Nidalee and Elise, where they don't really need it doesn't matter as much for them, because like champions like Lee can just get chunked so hard by the early clears that it helps them out a lot, being able to take that or take less damage, be able to maybe even gank a lane where if you know you're playing against like a Lee Sin or a Jarvan, it's going to be really hard for them to gank at the same time as you if you go for that early gank.
So Rek'Sai is not the queen of the jungle anymore?
Maybe. Like, it's really hard to say, but I think the Nidalee changes are really, really nice. The Nidalee change and then also the extra 100 gold will be really nice changes for her.
What do you think about the Rek'Sai changes?
The Rek'Sai change, I mean, come on, Rek'Sai is so ridiculous right now. It's just another nerf to Rek'Sai. And honestly, I think this might put him in a good spot.
You think so?
To where he's not too strong, but he's also still pretty viable and probably either in the tier 1 or tier 2 of junglers. Because he's still very potent. His kit's very good.
Yep.
But he's not going to be as face roll if he gets on top of you. And just, like, if he unburrows QQE auto, you're dead. I don't think it's going to be that much of the case anymore. Especially, I like what they did with the W change, where they gave it the reset timer scales down now, so you can get more unburrow knockups off in an elongated team fight. So they took a lot of his early game damage off, and they're giving him a little bit scaling into the mid and late game with unburrow plays, which I think is what he should be centric around, because that's a real cool part of his kit. And just getting slapped to death from his Q is not fun to play against.
Yeah.
What about the Hextech changes?
Gunblade.
Who builds Gunblade? Like
Akali.
Akali, they just nerf.
yeah, it's not gonna matter that much.
Like, why do you think Riot
Maybe,
did
like,
it to the item?
When Link played it in like rapid fire mode as Ezreal.
I think maybe Ahri will start building it. Could be. Because DFG nerf. It's used to be... yeah, people used to build it on Ahri before. A while ago, people built it on Ahri. Because it resets the cooldown from her spells, and you could just use it as a slow. And especially with the move speed you get from her Q now, it could work out really nice. It's just it's like a replacement for DFG. Obviously not nearly as strong.
I doubt it. But
I mean, like, I'm not saying that's gonna happen for sure, but I mean, it's just like something that I could see maybe happening, but mostly just for like Akali or something. Champions that aren't really played too often.
Okay. Does anyone want to tackle the portal changes?
I will attempt to. So after reading over the notes, what I've gathered is that they're making the portal less strong on structures and more about kind of destroying minions, which I think is good, because I think it could have gotten pretty out of hand once people got the hang of the item. Because if anybody saw like the portals being built in game, like mid to late game, that shit would do like 300 damage to a turret like per void spawn, and that's every 4 seconds. That would annihilate structures. And like if people like got good at using that thing and like using it strategically as a team, I think it could have gotten out of hand. But now it's more about wave control, like in side lanes and for tanks and whatnot. So I think that's where it should be, and not necessarily about like tanks just being annoying and placing it to just like annihilate an inhib and then like, hurry, let's go team fight while this thing kills the enemy inhib or something like that. So I think they're kind of catching it before it got out of hand, because I was kind of a big advocate of that item being like broken as shit late game. And now not so much. Now it's more about wave control, and you can maybe build it mid game now. I don't know.
Is there even a range on how far you can like run away from it? Because couldn't a top laner just like place it top lane and then teleport bottom or something?
The portal, the void spawn could only go so far. I'm not sure what the distance was, but yeah, they could only go so far, and they would like, if they got too far, they'd start losing health over time until they just died.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the items that like no one knows what's going on, because no one's been building it, so everyone else is like, fuck, I'm not gonna build it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very good. Like, you were probably dead on. Like, it would have definitely gotten out of hand, I feel.
It's kind of like Guardian Angel, where it's kind of cost inefficient to buy it, but you buy it for, the active it gives you, and I think it's just one of those items.
Yeah. Okay, so last we have the dragon changes. Is basically just a small change. It's not a big, just decrease the attack speed, and then but they made it so it's still the same damage.
Also has more attack range too.
Oh yeah, more attack range and more attack speed, but same. So do you think it's just because of how easy dragon was before to do. Like you just bounce it back between people, but the increased attack speed makes it so like it reacts faster.
I think the reason why they changed that is because, you know, when you're all grouped up doing dragon and stuff, and then the enemy team starts coming down, now you gotta really decide whether you're gonna stay on the dragon or fight the enemy team, because the dragon has more DPS now that it's attacking a lot faster.
No, it has the same.
Yeah. But
No, the damage is the same, but the attack speed is more, so it gets more attacks out.
Oh,
And it does
really?
AoE.
I thought I read that the overall damage was still the same.
No, they
Yeah.
nerfed the damage a little bit, but they buffed the
yeah,
attack
yeah.
speed.
I'm pretty sure
So
the
what
overall damage is
Trance-
the same.
It's just more attacks will happen in that short
What
amount of
Trance
time.
is saying though is it's gotten, you know, an AoE backlash. So if you're not careful and you like stay clumped too much,
That's
it'll
true.
shoot out a lot of
And
fireballs.
then the attack range.
and technically,
buff, too.
you know, the DPS will be increased from it doing that.
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
That's true.
Yeah, that is true. So it makes it harder for teams that are on the dragon, kind of.
Yeah, they're just making it harder to just like start dragon while focusing on
Yeah,
the
while
team fight.
while disengaging and
Yeah.
doing like both, like kiting back and doing the dragon.
Yeah, so maybe now you'll take like 3 hits instead of like 2 or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It'll like end up being more damage. You have to decide a bit faster.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very true. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I guess that's all. So just say your goodbyes
All right.
to the camera.
Thanks for watching.
Adios.
See you later.
All right. Cool.
See ya.
And see ya.